on today's StoryBeat.
Who am I if I'm not doing this? You know, it's like it's so much of your personality. It's more than a profession. It's like a lifestyle because you sacrifice so much, you put so much in, so you can't leave it.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Sören "Sulo" Karlsson, is mostly known as the frontman of the Swedish boogie rockers, the Diamond Dogs. But he's also known for being the singer of the UK supergroup, The Crunch, featuring members from The Clash, Sham 69, and Cockney Rejects. Since the early 1990s, Sulo has been carrying the torch for early 70s soulful rock and roll, well-rooted in British history. Through his career, he's worked with artists such as Ian Hunter, Terry Reid, Robert Wyatt, Max Martin, Crystal Gayle, Paul Young, Maria McKee, and more. Besides being one of Sweden's most prolific singer-songwriters, he's also an author of a handful of books, including co-writing the autobiography of the former UEFA President, Lennart Johansson, who was one of the most influential leaders of international football, or soccer as we call it in America. Lennart Johansson was the brains behind the Champions League. He was also responsible for bringing England back into the European Cups with his famous words, "England needs Europe and Europe needs England." I've read Sulo's book, Lennart Johansson, A Mate Among Bosses and Trophies, and found it to be a fascinating study of the legendary international soccer leader's life growing up as a poor boy from the outskirts of Stockholm, who had the unusual gift of being able to bring people together to work toward fair play in a game that includes everyone. I highly recommend Sulo's terrific book to you. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm deeply honored to welcome to StoryBeat the exceptionally multi-talented author and rock singer Sören "Sulo" Karlsson to StoryBeat today. Sulo, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's
a pleasure.
It's my great pleasure, believe me. So let's go back in time just a little bit. You've been singing and writing songs and books for a while now. When did your interest in music and writing begin? At what age were you?
Oh, I just spoke about. We had a chat about that for some other reason. It's my interest in music came from when I was 6 years old or something, 5-6 years old,
Wow.
Because. The thing is, when I was 6 years old, I think my first single was Elvis' "My Boy" from 1974, maybe, or something like that. And don't ask me why I bought it, but I thought it looked cool. But then I had some. What was the name of that TV show? Happy Days. Remember
Happy
that?
Days?
Yeah. And Henry Winkler, he had compilations coming out named Fonzie's Favorites. Remember them?
I do.
Yeah, and I got the first Fonzie's Favorites, and it was like Running Bear and Chubby Checker and stuff like that. But I think the fourth track on the first compilation is "Rip It Up" with Little Richard. And when I heard that song, something started in me. It was like, this is what I want to do. And to close that circle, this year in January, we released an album recorded a year before in January called "Making Georgia Giant," where we did a Little Richard tribute to Little Richard. Diamond Dogs together with famous legendary UK guitar player Chris Spedding.
Wow.
The guy who discovered Sex Pistols and produced the first Cramps demos and everything. So we did that album in 10 hours and then mixed in 4 or 5 hours, and it came out. And we have massive, great reviews from America and from England and from all over the world, which is a bit dangerous to kind of do Little Richard. And then figured out it was actually the first Little Richard full album tribute ever done. So when the reviews started coming in, we got emails from something we thought was a commercial thing, but it was actually the city Macon, Georgia, that wanted to have contact with us. So they invited us to Macon, Georgia in April. So we went to Macon, Georgia in April, and we played a big amphitheater. We met up with Otis Redding's daughter and his wife, and we recorded at the Capricorn Studio, and Little Richard's cousin came there, and we filmed everything. So that's when I got the question: when did you discover Little Richard? And I thought, that was my first love of music, was Little Richard.
All the way back to the beginning of your career.
Yeah.
Do you know who the bassist Suzi Quatro is?
Yeah, I actually traveled in a tour bus with her and Ian Hunter.
So Susie's been on this show twice. Talking about her music and her writing, because she writes books too.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And in fact, she's published by the same publishing house that you're under, which is New Haven Publishing. And she was on Happy Days. Did you know that?
No.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
She played Leather Tuscadero on Happy Days.
Okay. No, I mean, when I was traveling with, it was just one. We did a big festival in Sweden, and I was guesting with Ian Hunter, doing all the young dudes and all the way from Memphis. And we picked up Suzi Quatro at the airport. So it's me, Ian Hunter, Suzi Quatro, and Steve Holley from Wings, sitting at the table. And it was a bit,
Wow.
It was strange for me, it's like all those stars you see on the albums. I've toured a lot with Ian Hunter, but with Suzi Quatro became, it was almost over the top. It was fun.
So, all right. So what point in your life did you start to sing? When did you figure out you were a performer?
This year, in you don't celebrate Midsummer in America, but we celebrate Midsummer. And this Midsummer, we played the biggest festival in Spain, Asquena Festivals, and on the Midsummer Eve, Diamond Dogs together with Chris Spedding was headlining. We had John Fogerty just before us on the same stage, and wow. the day after, a band, great friends to me, Helicopters, was headlining, and they had Manic Street Preachers and everyone was there. We met with the Dead Kennedys and Lucinda Williams and Margot Price and everything. But the thing is, me and Bobba, who plays the keyboards in Helicopters, we formed our first band when we met in school when we were 16 years old. And it was, it was a nice feeling to sit backstage, me and him, 40 years later, and headlining this big festival when we started out in that basement when we were 16 years old in a small town in Sweden. So I would say when I was 16, that's when we started to get manic about it.
Did you know before that you had a voice, that you could sing?
The thing is, it's the thing with music. You got to have that passion for it. Sometimes they hire me they want me to have music classes to talk about how it is to be a professional musician. Everything I talk about is the passion. So it doesn't matter if you think you have the voice. You got to have the feeling that we're going to make it. We're going to do that. We're going to do this thing. And that's more important than any talent, because if you don't have that, call it whatever I'm going to get there. It doesn't matter how talented you are. But I think I was just convinced I was going to sing. and when we started write songs, it was just such a joy. It's people who are religious and found their way to God. It was the same thing for me. It's like, fuck me, I can do this. I can do it. And ever since then, I have a procedure, and it sounds a bit weird, but I actually write a song every day.
Every day?
Yeah, because it's like training. You got to keep your fantasy going all the time, and I jump between different genres. It could be country or jazz or punk or glam rock. I need a challenge all the time, and then one song every day. And I've done that for 15, 20 years now.
Wow, that's impressive. You write a whole song or just pieces of a song?
A whole song with the lyrics and everything.
That's amazing.
I write it and I record it to, easy record it to my phone or something, and then I send it to my publisher. And he's been he worked with ABBA back in the day, but he said, this is just mad. It comes a song every day. Sometimes my record so far was during the pandemic, when I probably was a bit, bored and tired of everything. I wrote 7 songs a day. That's my record.
7 songs a day.
Yeah.
So how long does it take you to write a song? It can't be very long then.
The thing is, it takes me It depends. I have the same procedure every morning. I walk my dogs. Then I come up with a melody in my head. Usually the first thing I need to have, but I collect them. I collect titles. I'm a title freak. A good song can be a good song with a poor title, but a great song needs to have a great title.
And that's the hook. That's your hook, right?
You got to have a great title. And the thing is that spoiled a lot of movies for me, because you're watching a movie and then you hear a line going, oh, wow, that's a great title. Now, I don't listen anymore. Watch the movie. I just think about that title. But I have that title. I go for a walk and I come up with a melody, and then I go back with the dogs, and then I take up my guitar, and then I taken out the melody, and then I write down the lyrics. And that's the way it works for me, because I have a very famous Swedish author who's done a lot of famous books, sold thousands of copies, and he's very disciplined. He writes down the whole story. He had some books, but he writes down by his hand the story before he writes it down. And I said, because I'm the same when I'm writing books. I'm sitting down and I'm writing 10 pages just out of nothing. That's it. And then 10 pages next. So I said, is that common? No. He said, but that's a wonderful gift to have, to just be able to pour it out.
But that is a marker of what you referred to a moment ago as passion. You are a passionate writer.
Yes.
You're writing songs and books and singing and performing, and all of it has to come from some part in your makeup that's very passionate. Yes?
Yes, and it's all about fantasy, really. But I mean, there's a downside to it as well, because on Saturday in Sweden, they have the Swedish Academy of Literature. They have a big meeting on this festival where I am right now. And they hired me to hold the speech, for the board,
Are you the keynote speaker?
Yeah, I'm going to do the speech. And this guy who films for me now, he says, have you written down anything? I said, no, I can't do that. I never do that. I have to shoot from the hip. I have to take it from...
Wow.
And that's what I think. I need the challenge, I need that nerve thing, that will this work? You can call it whatever. You need to be not nervous, but get that, tense feeling.
Have you ever gone out in front of a crowd like that and didn't know what to say?
I always say something, but I never prepare anything. I always take it.
That's amazing.
I never prepare. I mean, I worked as a morning host on a classic rock station in Sweden, for a couple of years. But it was hard to tour and do that, because when you work between 6 and 10 in the mornings, I never prepared anything. We just, and I think that's also the kind of artist, the entertainers, like Rod Stewart or Mick Jagger or Ray Davies, because back then in the 60s, you need to be able to entertain. Even if it's for 30 people or 30,000, you need to make them happy. And I like that old-fashioned style of doing it.
Do you, when you're performing, there are a lot of performers that have to forget about the fact that they're in front of tens of thousands of people in a stadium. They have to think about performing for one person. Is that how you are?
No, I love it. I take everything in. When we play now in Spain, we had like 10, 15,000 people. And so the band walks on, people are cheering, but I know they're waiting for the big howl when I'm running in. And I love that. And that moment when you run up the stage to the microphone and you just take it in, that's such a boost. That's a boost. There's no drug that can do that.
Well, there's nothing like that roar of the crowd to get you going.
Oh, no. I love that.
I am not a rock and roll star, but I've been on stage a couple of times where I was in front of a lot of people. And when that roar happens, it changes everything for that time.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And I think it's addictive. I mean, if you want to be I've been doing this for 30 odd years now. And if you want to be in the business, you need to have that addiction to embrace that as much as you embrace traveling or someone asked me, aren't you tired of traveling by bus? No, I said, no, we're professional bus travelers. we can go for 11 hours straight and not, you just enjoy it.
When you're not on the road, are you missing it?
sometimes the thing is happening when you're on the road is a strange thing. I think a lot of people would say the same, that if you do like 12 or 15 gigs in a row, and you do the 3 first gigs, and it's like, in Spain, you're dripping of sweat. We're doing 2 hours every night, and you try to, shower 4 times, and you sleep 3 hours and up again and in the bus. And the first 2-3 gigs are kind of hard. But then you come to the 4th gig, and you walk into some kind of a cloud of, you have your space, your place, you have your water bottle, you have everything, and you don't have a clue what the first gig was. It's like it just passes by, and it's strange, but it's also a bit, I like it.
You enjoy the road.
I enjoy everything that artistic, because it comes with the freedom. It comes with freedom. If you know what I mean with that, freedom is like Ian Hunter told me once. I think it's a good thing. We played in Birmingham. We had an acoustic tour. It was Steve Holley and him and some guitar player, and I had a guitar player and keyboard player. We did theaters around England. We played in Birmingham, and just before we was going to walk up, and it was a sold out gig, and he was sitting kind of close to the stage, and he said, "Hey, Sulo, have a look at, what do you think about her?" And it was like a lady in her 60s or something sitting, in front of what do you think about her? And I said, well, yeah, I was kind of, I was much younger. I said, yeah, well, she's fine. Yeah. And he said, yeah, if we keep on doing this, Sulo, we'll be teenagers forever. And that's the feeling. We'll be teenagers forever. It's that, and that's the thing with touring too, because you never stop. It's like, you kind of think, oh, people live in this house as they go to work, but we're leaving tomorrow.
Think about Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney still out there knocking it out in their 80s.
Yeah. And I think actually it's about, they always talk about the money, but I think the issue with those, it's like they can't stop. At the moment, I'm writing a book about a very, very famous Swedish. It's like the punk, the Johnny Rotten of Sweden. He's played in industrial music, very dark, and and bringing like 16,000 people coming to see him in Stockholm, everywhere. And he's never doing any interviews. He's not doing any TV, any radio, but he's doing the book with me. And the thing with, he lives in Berlin. So I went down to him in Berlin. He has his own little studio in the Hansa, in the legendary Hansa, where Bowie and everyone hang out. And he's like, I think he's 68, and said, if I'm not going to do this, who am I if I'm not doing this? It's like it's so much of your personality. It's more than a profession. It's like a lifestyle, because you sacrifice so much, you put so much in, so you can't leave it.
So when you first started in the business and formed the Diamond Dogs, and you were working all that time, did you think back then you'd still be doing it decades later?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the thing when we started with Diamond Dogs, because I had another band, and then someone put me together with a guy to recording some demos. So I had a band, but when I met this guy in his little studio, also in the basement somewhere, we kind of did everything just me and him, because that was Max Martin. That was Max Martin? Yeah. We did 10 songs. Wow. We did 10 songs, and just me and him. I played the bass, and we played a little bit of everything. We're building gospel choirs and stuff like that. And I got a record deal, and that was the first time I thought, it sounds great. The first time when you do something and you feel like, I can do this. This is great. This is great songs. And after, I think that was actually the kick into, I will always do this, because that's what we do. And the funny thing with Max Martin is, like 15 years later, I was working on a solo album, and we needed some male backing vocals. And we were sitting in the studio, and we needed some male backing vocals. Do you know anyone? And we talked about, yeah, we could call him. And I said, I could call Martin if you want to. And they went, okay, yeah. So I called Martin, and he answered that. I wanted to do some backing vocals. I went, oh, yeah, I'm coming. And I won't pay you anything. And he came there. So he did 3 tracks on that album. So he's just he's just so talented musician and producer and everything. Well, for the listeners who may not know, tell them a little of who Max Martin has produced. Well, he started out in something called what was the name of the studio now? I can't remember now. But he started out with another famous Swedish producer called Dennis Pop. Sharon was the name of the studio. And he did some Swedish acts, but then he did Backstreet Boys, and he did everything with Britney Spears, and he did Bon Jovi's comeback. He did Bryan Adams. When he came back to see that, to do that backing vocals for me, I said to him, I haven't heard about you for a while. Have you done anything? Well, yeah, I did that Kelly Clarkson, the US Idol winner.
Yes,
and I said,
yes, he did.
And I said, was it, did it turn out all right? He said, well, it was the most played song in America.
It's
and I went,
gigantic.
I could take the most played song in California. That's enough for me.
That's enough for you. You'd probably be happy with the most played song in Stockholm, right?
Oh, yeah. Or this band where I'm sitting at the moment now, they play in a genre you don't really have. Do you know Dog Sam?
I do not.
Is anybody going to San Antonio? Have you heard that song?
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah. It kind of a light country music style. We have a style in Sweden where people go and dance to, and that's a big genre in Sweden. Dance bands, they call them. And I just figured out I wrote the biggest dance band song ever in Sweden.
Really?
Because it's streamed in Sweden 24 million times. So it's...
wow. That's pretty good. So what is the difference in your world between what you did with the Diamond Dogs and what you did with the Crunch? Is it a totally different sound?
I mean, the Crunch was the Crunch started out of a book that I did with a Swedish music journalist. We're really big fans of English football in Sweden. And he made a book called The Dream 11, but it wasn't the 11 best players of the English league. It was actually the 11 worst players of the English league. You know, the hard drinking, the rock and rollers like George Best, and you know, the people who were, they have all the stories. So we met on a book fair, and he said, we should do the same thing, but with music, because he knew I had a lot of contacts in England. So, and we do that. We travel around, we do different portraits, like, you know, of all those different, you know, forgotten stars like that. And then you record a song with each and every one. And I thought, well, yeah, that's the way it worked with me. They give me, you know, I come up with an idea and then I just go for it. So 3 weeks later, we were on the flight over to London. And then we did that book called Keep Yourself Alive, where we met Steve Hackett. We met Tom Robinson, Robert Wyatt, and all those, you know. And I actually recorded a song with everyone as a soundtrack to the book. And during that book lounge, Terry Chimes and from The Clash and Dave Tregunna from Sham 69, Lords in New Church, and McKee came over. So we did, and that was actually the first time Terry Chimes played the drums for 20 years. So
really?
we did a couple of Clash tracks, and after that, Dave Tregunna said we should form a band. And I said, "Do you think Terry want to play?" "Yeah, I think I can see it in his eyes. He's back on it." And it was. So you know, like 3 months later, we were recording in London at the Barry Street Studios, and the big difference was that was my childhood, the punk thing, the English punk scene. So I had the opportunity to go back and write songs like they did back in 76, 77. And I mean, Diamond Dogs is probably more 1972. But
well, Diamond Dogs, am I correct that Diamond Dogs is less punk and the Crunch is more punk?
Well, Diamond Dogs isn't punk at all, I would say. I think Diamond Dogs is, I mean, when we formed Diamond Dogs, it was probably, you know, the worst moment in music history to do that, because it was in the beginning of the grunge era, you know. And I just discovered the beauty of the early Rod Stewart stuff, which was completely wrong when the grunge was going. You know, that when you mix folk music with soul and Sam Cooke with, you know. So we went full into that, all that early British, like, you know, Rod Stewart, of course the Stones, but also Slade, the whole, you know, that thing, which is a mix between glam rock, boogie, pub rock and everything. And so kind of far away from the crunch, because crunch is more of a punk power pop group. And so that was different, yeah. But Diamond Dog's been doing the same thing for 30 years. We've done 15 albums so far.
Wow. And you are very comfortable in all these different genres, yeah?
Yeah. I always take a challenge. As I said, I knew I was able to write good country. So first, I did the biggest country star we have in Sweden, who actually had a TV show in Nashville in the 80s, an American TV show in Nashville that she broadcast, and she sold like 3.5 million albums in Sweden. She's one of the biggest stars we have with like, and she's also a headline queen with drink driving and blah blah blah. So when I met, talking about challenges, when I met her on a TV show, she hadn't done an album in 18 years.
What's her name?
Kiki Danielsson. And I got her back. So now we've done 6 albums and we're touring, and I wrote a book about her life, and that became a theater play. And then when I did her and I could do the country that she liked, I thought I might have a go, see if I can do it over the pond. And then when I sent a song to Crystal Gayle, and she said yes, and Maria McKee said yes, and Janice Ian said let's do it, and then I kind of I thought, I can write country songs. So I like to put that challenge. I've done some jazz songs for another girl. I didn't know I could do that.
Do you listen to lots and lots of different kinds of music all the time?
Yes.
What do you, when you really are in a mood just to listen to something, do you have a particular genre that you prefer, or do you just, it's everything?
I would say I'm very weak for those. One of my great heroes died a couple of days ago, Terry Reid.
Yes.
Yeah, I recorded with him too in London. I'm quite weak for that soul music from of course, the Southern soul from the 60s, and also the white, blue-eyed soul from UK that did their best to sound as black as possible, but sound even more white. I kind of like that thing. So I like Rod Stewart and Frankie Miller and Terry Reid and Joe Cocker and I love Van Morrison, of course. Van Morrison can save any night. So it's all that stuff. That's probably my favorite music. Then you have albums that you only listen to in very specific time, like
what?
Like London Calling, because if you put on London Calling with Clash, you have to listen to it all. You can't just listen to a song because it's so good. Or Blonde on Blonde with Bob Dylan, or X on Main Street,
So I've spoken to a huge number of people in the music business, and you're very unusual because most of them, though they may have likes in different genres, you're very widespread. You like it all.
Yeah. And during the pandemic, when I actually stopped listening to the news, before the pandemic, I kind of used to listen to the news in the morning. But then I can't listen to the news because it was so depressing, everything. I started to do breakfast with Chet Baker. So I started listening to Chet Baker, which was a much nicer way to start the day with Chet Baker or that.
That's as much in the jazz genre as it gets, Chet Baker.
Yeah. Oh, I love Chet Baker.
So how do you think then, this is what fascinates me, so you absorb all of this different kind of music. How does that then come out of you in, let's say, something that you're writing for the crunch? Does it inform your music in some way?
I had this discussion with a bass player in Diamond Dogs who played a lot of jazz in his early days, and he said, "I love to hang out with freaks like you." But because he said, "No, don't take it like that. You're a genius," he said, "but you're a freak too because you're writing songs in a very well-known genre, but you can't. You don't nick it. It's just." You just color them the way they colored them back then.
Right.
And you do it when you do in the country, you color them the same way, but you can't say, "Oh, this is a Tanya Tucker track," or this is no, because you just color them. And I can't really explain that. I love buying records. I don't have Spotify. I never had Spotify because I love buying records, which is
vinyl or CDs.
I have to say I'm a CD guy. I love because it's such a great sound. I kept a couple of those Sony Walkman CD players. The ones they had before they have a volume limiter.
With cassettes.
No. With
With
CDs.
CDs, got it.
Yeah, and you can play really loud, and you can bring it with you. But sometimes when you're sitting on a train and you have like in your bag you have like a couple of CDs, and you put on it you feel like a dinosaur when they're looking at you. But I don't care because I love CDs, and I love digging down deep in every genre. So if I must step into the country music, I dig down deep to understand. Okay, what was they listening to when they wrote that song? I check out different, songwriters. I end up really odd stuff you probably haven't heard about. Then I read everything about them because I want to hear the story about who they were playing with and how they connected with different kind of things.
So when you're writing, and you say you write all these songs every day, when you're writing, do you feel like, as many creative people do, that the music and the writing and the words are coming through you from somewhere else?
Yeah, I just put up the tap, and I hope that tap will keep on pouring.
Well,
and
yeah.
I think I 2-3 years when I did 5 albums, not for me, but I wrote for other people. I've done 5 albums a year, which is strange. You're doing 5 albums with stuff.
That's a lot of albums.
Yeah, when we speak now, I have the Little Richard album is out. I didn't write that, but I was singing on it. And then I have 2 books coming, 3 books this year, and it's an album with this band in a couple of months just, and it's kind of high profile stuff, and I never think about it like that. But a lot of people just ask me all the time, how do you manage to do so much? How many hours do you have on a day?
You're what they call prolific. You're just churning it out. So, well, you bring up books. Let's talk about the Lennart Johansson book for a moment, because that's something obviously that I read and very much enjoyed. Have you always been a fan of football?
Yes, I come from a football family. Everything was gathering around football. My dad, when he took a holiday, if you went down, with a caravan on a holiday, he pointed out different cities we can watch different kind of games. So it's been football all the way, and it's been a specific club. If you saw my phone now, you should see it blinking, because we're just now meeting a team from Hungary, and we have 2-0 in half time. So I'm fine. It's a club. It's a club called AIK.
That was his team, Lennart Johansson's team.
That was his team, and this is one of Sweden's oldest teams from Stockholm. And I did what do you call it? I was a conferencer on the ice hockey.
An announcer?
No, not announcer. I was doing the interviews with the players. And
you were interviewing people, sure.
Yeah, I had to interview people on the VIP section, which was a couple of hundred people. So I do the interviews with the players and the coaches and different people. I did that, and for a long time, like 10 years. I did, when I had time, I was there doing the interviews, and then I wrote another book for 2 famous football twins who played on the same team, and I became a profile in a character in the club, so everyone knew me, and that's why they called me and they said, "Do you want to have a meeting in the big room?"
Had you met Lennart Johansson before then?
No.
You'd never met him before?
Never met him before.
And at that point, was he sort of toward the end of his career?
Yeah, but he was an honorary chairman of the club, and he was still doing, he's still going to the Champions League final and the European final, because he was such a big part of that for such a long time. And they wrote a book called The Dirty Game in the 90s, I think. Some guy called Jennings, I think it was English, and he called me actually when I did the Lennart Johansson and said, Lennart is the only one who's never been in corruption. He never did, and then that's made him so much bigger than the other one. Even if they just were, people were thinking they probably do stuff, but that's what made him such a big person. And for a long time, he was the most well-known Swedish person outside Sweden in the world, together with that.
Would you say that that's what made him completely unique in the world of football, is that he was not corrupt?
Yeah, that's true.
So how did you get to start to work with him on the book? Did they actually bring you in to work with him, or did that just evolve?
No, they did. They brought me in and asked me if I could do the book because they wanted to have the book to his 90th birthday, and this was in May, and we have a spring fall season, so it was in May and it was looking pretty good, and this is typical IIK style to ask, and I asked them, well, when do you want the book done? And they said, well, what about when we take the championship? This, and I said, okay, of course.
And how long out would that have been? A couple of months?
Yeah, 5 months or something like that, 4 or 5 months. and then they called Lennart in the room, and we decided to meet next Tuesday, and then it just took a couple of days, and then we talked every day, and it was just amazing. I mean, the biggest thing for me about this book was after a month, when he said to me, when we were sitting listening to Frank Sinatra, we did that between the questions. We were sitting. He wanted to have a gin and tonic, so I fixed him a gin and tonic, and then he listened to Frank Sinatra. He knew all the lyrics, so he could sing, and he taught me some lyrics too. And then he said, the best thing with this book, and I said, no, what's that? Is that we became mates. He said, that's the best thing.
Nice.
So that was he was such a warm and and I never have had a VIP treatment like I had with Lennart, because we had a game. He said, we had do you want to join me on the game? Yeah, I can. Then they picked me up with a fancy taxi, and we're going out to this big arena, and I've been there many times before, but this car went into the arena and all the way into an elevator, and then straight up and straight out to a table that was like behind some flowers from the other VIP section. It was just, and then we just sat down. It was a scotch on the table.
Wow.
It was just amazing.
So did you spend most of your time interviewing him, or you'd get information from him? Is that how it worked?
We actually talked a lot about different, he was almost 90 years old, so he told me some amazing stories. I mean, I remember when I had some fantastic forewords. I was really proud of my forewords, because I talked about him when he was he went to the Olympics 1948 in London. This is long before that you can actually know anything about anything, and Sweden won. They won the Olympic Games, and one of the players was the girl he was going to marry, his brother.
Right.
And then I thought it was an amazing story, and then I wrote this story. I think it was perfect. I wrote about Lennart Johansson, in 1948 in London. The Olympics before that was 1936 in Berlin, and the most well-known Swede back then was a guy called Sven Hedin, who was actually a Nazi. And I said the difference between Lennart and Sven Hedin couldn't be bigger. I said, I was really happy with that, because he was just a man of the people, and that was just, something else. And then he said, when I read the whole foreword for him, and he said, yeah, that's good, he said, but, I was there. And I said, what? I was there. What do you mean there? In Berlin? No. And I thought it was, he was old. I thought, listen, no, it's 1936. Lennart, you're like 6 years old. Yeah, no. My friend, I had a friend in school. His name is Eric. His mom was from Germany, and I joined them on holiday in 1936. I went like, what? So we went down, and they said, we have the Olympics in town. You want to watch? So he saw Jesse Owens, win everything. And I went like, my whole forward just went bust. And he said, and then I saw him standing there. And I said, who? Jesse Owens? No, Hitler. He said,
Hitler.
Yeah. And that was like, wow. So he told me so many stories. I mean, he visited Frank Sinatra a couple of times. He was at Frank Sinatra's home. It was just amazing stories of a time that it was like watching a film. It was amazing. It was fun writing, fun work with him, and it was so much knowledge.
So did you do a lot of research beyond talking to him?
I had a very good guy that helped me, like a researcher. he's like the we call him the Rain Man of football. We call him, which is like, you can ask him, like, in 1974, that World Cup game against West Germany, how many corners from the left? So it must be 8, I think, if you don't count that. He's like that. So he helped me quite a lot. But then I did a lot of research.
What was the most difficult part of doing that research?
I think the most difficult part was to talk about the corruption thing, and when you did it, you kind of figured out, oh yeah, because it's like there was some corruption in the, what you called it? It's called CONCACAF. It's like the Central America. It's like Cuba and Trinidad Tobago and stuff like that. And someone, they spent a lot of money in that area building something for the kids, like athletic grounds and football grounds, but it was just money down. They just was money laundering, and then I just figured out, oh, that's why Sweden were meeting Trinidad Tobago in the World Cup 1996. How the hell was Trinidad Tobago? How could they qualify to the World Cup? Everything made sense, and that was probably the tricky part. Then we have a tricky part in Europe too, because in 1992, Lennart Johansson made the European Championship. They did it in Sweden. But at the same time, the war started in former Yugoslavia. And at that time, Yugoslavia, all those countries together called Yugoslavia, they probably had the best football team in the world. And when that happened, Kofi Annan, the FN, he called Lennart to say, we can't have them. You can't, because it's war, we can't be in the tournament. And Lennart had to say to them that that they couldn't be in the tournament, and that became some bad blood from the Croatians and the Serbs and stuff like that. And Denmark got their place, and they thanked for that and won the whole European Championship. And so that was a tricky part, because that was when they were shooting at him and stuff like that, which is very uncommon, really, in Sweden or in Europe otherwise.
Well, he had a really huge life. I mean, he lived not only all these experiences and all these parts of history, but his own life was quite crazy. His own personal life was quite crazy.
Yeah. He had a crazy life, and he was. We talked a lot about it, and I think it's the same thing with me. The thing that keeps you going is that you need to be curious all the time. If you stop being curious what's around the next corner, you might as well give up, And he was curious. He was still curious when he was 89, and unfortunately, he got sick and he died when he was 89. And I sang at his funeral, which is probably the only time I was so nervous. I've never been so nervous in my whole life. I was singing My Way, of course, Frank Sinatra to a organ. When there's no beat in an organ, so I had to put my feet on a chair to keep the beat, and there was like thousand people. It's like a huge funeral. Everyone was there. The Prime Minister, the whole UEFA, everyone was there, and even Platini, that Michel Platini, the French football player, that was actually, he was a fraud. He was corrupted, and so he came too. And it was amazing. I told myself, I was thinking about Lennart, because I became a close friend to his family, and they asked me to sing, and I said, I couldn't say no. You can't really say no to that. But and I tried to tell myself, if I can do this, I can do anything. If I can stand up and sing, that you can do anything. So I did that with all the, and my team, they were all there. Every prayer, they came up and lifted up the coffin and everything. And it was just, I can't believe I did it. And then afterwards, Lennart told me, before he went, he told me, when I'm dead, when you have the funeral for me, I don't want you to sit around and have some coffee afterwards. I want to go with a bang. So we went to the big grand hotel, next to the castle, the 200 people closest to him and to the club, and then we have three main, 3 dishes, like a full dinner, and then, of course, a free gin and tonic and champagne bar.
So he wanted a joyous celebration, not a sad one.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the book for a second, because I'm curious how you did it. Once you spoke to him and interviewed him, and you got all those good stories, and then you did the research that you needed to do. How did you start to write the book? Did you outline the book in advance, or did you do what you do when you speak? Did you just start and go?
I did just start and go, I think.
The book is chronological, right?
Yes, but also it's also written in him as a first person. I hadn't done that before, but when you do that, you kind of rush into the story, and the story just rushes to you because that's the actual person speaking, which is
Right.
amazing. That's
Right.
amazing reading this kind of. So I try to have that feeling all the time about. I mean, always when I write books, I see it like a movie. You see it on scenes. You know, you see it like a script, how it happened and everything. And do you know anything about boxing?
Do I know about boxing?
Yeah.
Little bit.
They called him the last white champ, the Ingmar Johansson, Ingo. He won 1959 against.
I know who Ingmar Johansson was. Yeah.
And they celebrated Midsummer Eve. That was just one of those, like a film scene. They celebrated Midsummer Eve on the outskirts of Stockholm in some garden. They have a Midsummer Eve. Ingmar Johansson, Lennart Johansson, and a couple other friends. And he was still active boxing. And this is you kind of see it as a film, like, and when they're having some drinks. Of course, they do the snaps as they do at Midsummer. And Lennart says, "Oh, shouldn't we do some boxing?" And everyone, "Wow, you think so?" So they put up like some tape around. They made a little square so they could box there. and Ingo said, "Oh, you want to have a go, Lennart?" "Yeah, of course, yeah." So they went in, and he told me it was like just a lovely little film scene. And then he said to Lennart, "Here you go. Good night." He said. He just knocked him on the cheek and he went over. And it's just that's how I saw the book all the time. It was because it was like memories, like a film from a long time ago. And it's like biographies. When you're writing a biography, I remember Terry Shimes of The Clash. He said, "Don't read the Keith Richards biography. I've been bloody reading 150 pages and he's still 6 years old." And that's. I wanted to make it like a story, like you could film it.
Well, I was going to say, it felt like it could be adapted into a movie of some kind.
Yeah.
Have you tried to get that done? Is that something you're working on?
We have talked about it, and I think it would work very well. And
so now a screenwriter, Sulo, may come in and say to you, "You know what? We're not going to make this chronological. We're going to bounce back and forth in time, and we're going to start with." I'm just making this up, of course, but we're going to start with Lennart on his deathbed and remembering back to his life, and then you bounce back and forth in time. That's one way to think about it.
I would love that. That's the way that's actually how I wrote the book from the start. When I did the first 10 chapters, I was like, it was now, this is now. He talks about it now. Then we jump back to a memory. Right. Then we back to now, and then we back to memory. So that's how I wrote it. So you can actually say I wrote it as a script in that way, really.
Mm-hmm. About how long did it take you overall to write the book once you started?
The thing was, I started in May. We had a game home in late October. That was actually the game where we could have secured the champion. So it was like 50,000 people. It was a big, tifo. It was a big tifo with Lennart Johansson. It was all set for amazing, for my book too. It's like, this is amazing. We have a Lennart tifo because, he named there's his name on the trophy. You win the Lennart Johansson trophy. That's the thing.
Right.
But we didn't manage to win. So we draw that game. And I was like, no. So I went home, and I'm a bit superstitious when it comes to football. So I went home, and I was really disappointed. And Lennart called me and said, "You want to come down south in Kalmar in Sweden, where was the last game? We're going to win it down there," he said to me. And I said, "No, I can't do it." But because I was so nervous to go down there, and I'm a bad loser. To go there and lose it and don't win, that would be horrible. I didn't want to be there. So I stayed in the room writing on the book as the game went on my phone. So I watched it on the phone, writing on the book, and then we won. And it was just a relief. It was perfect for me. And I was done with the book. So I hold the agreements.
All right, so you have spent most of your career in collaboration with other people, either artists or someone like Lennart. You obviously do a lot of writing on your own, but you also spend a lot of time in collaboration. What makes a good collaboration work? How does it make it successful?
If you're writing songs with people, you can. I wrote some songs with Randy Bachman from Bachman Turner Overdrive. It was great. We did 3 songs in a day, and we threw some lines back and forth and some riffs and stuff like that. I think you need to fill in something that the other one won't think about. You need to give each other stuff all the time, and of course, in the end, learn from each other. That's why I love to work with older people, because you can learn so much about. They've done so many things. I love that, to pick up those skills they had back and how they were thinking and how you. So I think it's you need to come in with an open mind, but it doesn't always work. That's you probably have that a lot probably in America too. They have like songwriting teams where they're writing for some,
Sure,
so,
of course.
And you sit with some people and half of them can't even take a chord of a guitar. They just, and that won't work for me. I once was invited for this Eurovision, you pick 10 songwriters to write for this artist. I didn't know it was all about that. It was just, this is not me, I thought, So I faked I had an appointment at the dentist, so I
left. So the important part then is to find partners or collaborators that feed off of you and you feed off of them.
Yeah. And to have an open mind, because if you work with someone that says, oh, it's got to be this way, it's got to be, for me, it's like,
that won't work.
Nothing's got to be anything, we're doing what's going to be the best. But that's why I love to work with producers, because I believe that producers are adding stuff that I wouldn't do myself.
That they are adding what? Touches, flourishes, ways to look at things?
Thoughts and plans, they say, let's skip that thing and do like this, or, take it down there, or add an accord, color the chord and put a minor, or, where it was a major, stuff like that, little pieces and stuff that I have a full confidence that, I would love to work with Rick Rubin.
Have you read his book on creativity?
No, I haven't done that.
Oh,
no.
I highly urge you to get Rick Rubin's book on creativity. It is astonishing. I've read it twice already. I feel like I need to read it a third time. It's like a total revelation.
I made a big gig with the Cult, the English band The Cult. We shared a football arena in Spain, in Benidorm. In front of 12,000 people. We did like a double bill, 90 minutes each. And I spoke to Ian Asprey about Rick Rubin. And he said when they did that Electric album, and they wanted to do all those gothic, flanger guitars and all those choruses and everything. And he said, are you a rock and roll band, or what are you? We're a rock and roll band. And it took everything away. He was all dry. He was like, now you're
the amazing thing about Rick Rubin, allegedly, is that he really isn't a musician at all. He's just a guy he's a psychologist. He gets people to do their best work.
We actually have our own Rick Rubin in Sweden. He became the biggest death metal producer.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard about Entombed or Dismember, or it's huge bands, and they did American bands. They were flying in to work with him. I named him the Swedish Rick Rubin because, very strange, he never himself been into death metal, because he loves the Beatles and David Bowie. So everything he records, when he says, he can record a death metal band, grinding and growling, and then he says to them, well, you need to think a little bit more like, on the Wyatt album. Have you heard of Wyatt album? And they go like, what? I remember he played something for me. I think it's called Noisecore. It was like 40 seconds. It sounded like, whoa. Then it just stopped and looked at me and said, it's a little bit blues, do you think?
It's a little bit blues.
And I think that's Rick Rubin too. He hears stuff, and he sees stuff that, that we don't see.
They are psychologists. They get people to think differently, and by doing that, they become their better selves. And so It's fascinating when someone is like that. Well,
Yeah.
I've been having just the most marvelous conversation for an hour now with Sulo Karlsson, and he's in Sweden. I'm still in Pittsburgh, and we're going to wind the show down a little bit. And I'm wondering, in all of your experiences, beyond the great stories you've already told us, can you share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
I would pick. I have many. I would probably put them in a book later on. But
Great, do that.
there's so many. I had the opportunity during my career to meet and work with and play with many of my idols. Like, as I said, Ian Hunter, Nazareth, The Damned. We toured a lot with Hannah Rocks, and sometimes I also had the opportunity or the bad timing to not see who people are. I remember we played in London once. It was a great gig, and then it was like a party afterwards, and we had Dan Baird from You're the Satellites, and what's his name from Flaming Groove? Chris Wilson from Flaming Groove is joining us on stage. I was on a high, and then walked in a man that actually I thought he was working in the, taking care of the clothes in the wardrobe. I thought he was working there. So he came in, and he had a really, nice English accent. He said, "Oh, thank you for a lovely evening of rock and roll." And, "Oh, thank you." And I was like, I didn't push him away. It was like this. Well, I'm hanging with Chris Wilson. I was like, but Dan Baird and Chris Wilson went like, "Oh, well, Sude, I think you should say hello to." I said, "What? Him? He works." I was like that. And then it was John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. and I thought, fuck me, I can't do, I won't do that again. And then it happened again. Then we played at the Coco, the Camden Palace in London. We had this, There was a film lounge for Joe Strummer film called I Need a Dodge. So it was like Pretenders and Ruts and Saints, and we did the Crunch. We did some Clash songs with the Crunch. It was Don Letts. Everyone was there. It was like I was living my childhood dream. And there was a nice old man in the dressing room, pouring tea and saying, "I want a cup of tea." "Oh, thank you." He was really nice. So I was completely convinced that he took care of us, and he was the guy who took care of the dressing room. And then we walked back and forth all the time, jumped in. It was double drummers, It was just a great evening. And I walked in, and he was like standing in a suit with his back against me. And he had like Cuban high heels. I thought, Jesus, what's he doing? And then he had this old guitar case. He opened the guitar case and put up the guitar. And I said, "Oh." And I wanted him to notice me. So I went, "Okay." So then he turned around. He was the American flag. And he said, "Well, it's my turn now." So he walked down on stage and said, "It's time to testify. It's a kick out the jams, motherfuckers." It was Wayne Kramer. I thought he was taking care of the dressing room.
That's hilarious. He was just being a cordial, nice person.
Yeah, of course.
So you have to be careful who you're talking to backstage then, don't you? So, all right, last question for you today, Sulo. Yeah. You've shared with us pretty significant number of bits of advice throughout this whole show, but I'm wondering if you have a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you give to those who come up to you and say, how do I get into the business, or how do I get to the next level in the business?
I usually say, well, as I said before, it's the passion, but keep on being curious and believe in it, and sometimes I say the truth is you have to spend those 10,000 hours first, and you have to be comfortable doing all those. There's a lot of downs before it comes the ups. But if you can do that, if you can manage that, you still have the passion, you're still curious, you still have the spirit, then it's a tiny little chance. Just grab it.
I think that is exceptional advice. You've got to put the time in to make it happen. It's not just going to happen just because you feel like it. You have to do the work. And clearly you're a hard worker. You've worked your whole career and you continue to work, and that's what it takes. The people who succeed and continue to succeed don't stop working at it. You have to, that's what professionals do. Sulo Karlsson, this has been an absolutely wonderful hour on StoryBeat, and I can't thank you enough for your time, your great energy, and all of your wisdom. I greatly appreciate your being on the show with me.
Thank you for having me.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.